This whiskey perfectly encapsulates Islay in a bottle. Let's talk about Kilchoman Islay barley. Hey guys, welcome back to Whiskey on the West Coast. My name is Matt, and today we're going to be talking about and reviewing the Kilchoman 100% Islay Barley 10th edition, which was released in 2020. Now, when I visited Islay in June, it was no secret when you saw these semi-trucks loading up on the ferries bound for the mainland with giant placards, warning placards all over them, that they were heading to the mainland filled with new make spirit. They were trucking whiskey off of Islay to the mainland to be aged over there. So again, it's no secret that there's a number of distilleries that just don't have the warehouse capacity to store all the whiskey that they produce on Islay. And so not all the whiskey that's made on Islay is actually aged on Islay by the ocean. And when it comes to the vast majority of the barley that's used to make our beloved Islay whiskeys, most of it actually isn't grown on Islay. It's grown elsewhere. Islay is not a large place. Like, how could it be? And barley's really a resurgent crop on the island. It's not something that has always been grown in as large numbers as it is right now. I don't even think it's actually possible for the current bumper crop of barley on Islay to provide all the barley that's required to fulfill one of the distillery's needs for a year, let alone all of them. Furthermore, Islay peat isn't necessarily used in all the whiskeys that are made on Islay. Some of them use mainland peat to make their peated whiskeys. Thus enters this whiskey. This whiskey is completely of the place it was made. This is 100% Islay. It's not even just the 100% Islay barley. It is 100% Islay. Kilchoman is a farm distillery on Islay and is comparatively small to all the other distilleries on the island. They grow their own barley in fields surrounding the distillery, and this is where the majority, if not all, of their Islay barley that they use for this release comes from. It comes from their own fields. And everything they make at Kilchoman is filled into casks at the distillery. It's aged at the distillery. And it is bottled at the distillery. It is 100% of Islay. Their standard core range releases are heavily peated whiskeys. They're about 50 phenol parts per million, if you're familiar with ppm levels. And they use barley that's been malted at the Port Ellen maltings. Now, they did use Port Ellen malt. Whether they're going to use that in the future is another question. We'll talk about that in another video coming up soon, so look out for that. However, this Islay barley release is distilled completely from barley that they've grown on their own fields, as I've mentioned. At present, there's only 2 distilleries I know of on Islay that are using Islay barley for some of their releases. These are Bruichladdich and Kilchoman. Now, Kilchoman is also one of only 3 distilleries on Islay that have their own floor maltings. It's Kilchoman, it's Bowmore, and it's Laphroaig. Now, they use this floor maltings to floor malt their own Islay barley. That's the only barley that they floor malt there is their Islay barley, at least to my knowledge. And when they're drying their own floor malted barley, they are running peat in their kiln that's being cut from the nearby Loch Gorm, Islay's largest freshwater loch. Now, that name might sound familiar because Kilchoman has a whiskey release called Loch Gorm. It's a sherried Kilchoman release. I think, personally, Loch Gorm would have been a much better name for this whiskey than for that whiskey, because this whiskey is actually made with peat that's been cut from the banks that have been harvested from the shores of Loch Gorm. I think it's a missed opportunity. However, 100% Islay barley is still a very apt name for this release. Now, the ppm level of that barley that they floor malt themselves is much lower than the Port Ellen spec barley. It's actually less than half, is 20 phenol parts per million. And that's going to give you a very different kind of whiskey experience than you'll get in something like Macure Bay or Seneg. Now, they not only age their whiskey on Islay, but when they bottle it on Islay, they're using Islay water as the source for reducing their whiskeys as well, instead of, say, some mainland water source that's been heavily chlorinated or has some other materials in it. So when this bottle was reduced down to 50% bottling strength from its cask strength. They used something, again, of the island. This whiskey is something that's just 100% of the place it was made. This is Islay in a bottle, and I'm excited to go ahead and start drinking this. So before we get to that, I just want to thank you guys so much for watching this far, for listening. If you haven't already, if you can go ahead and like, share, subscribe, leave a comment down below. All these things really help with the videos and getting them out to people and really just sharing the channel with others. So really appreciate all the support. And my question for you guys before we get to the review is, have you had anything from a farm distillery like Kilchoman? Have you had something from Daft Mill? What have your experiences been with? Do you have a favorite expression from a farm distillery? Let me know down in the comments down below, and just generally what you think about the Kilchoman Distillery. I'm really excited about them, but I'm also really excited to dive into this whiskey. So some specs on the bottle here. Again, this is the Kilchoman 100% Islay Barley 10th edition. It was distilled. We don't know the date it was distilled, but it was distilled from barley harvested in 2007, 2009, and 2010. And it was bottled in 2020. This tag here actually contains all that information about when it was bottled, how old it is, and its cask makeup, number of bottles in it. It's really actually handy that they have that little tag there. And I think it's a beautiful bottle, really. This is a minimum of 9 years old. So there's some whiskey potentially that is older than that in this whiskey. Bottled at 50% ABV. It's non-chill filtered. It's natural color, all things we love to see. The cask makeup is 39 Ex-Bourbon casks, 2 Oloroso Sherry Butts, and as mentioned earlier, this is not the heavily peated Kilchoman. This is the more moderately peated, 20 phenol parts per million, and there were 12,400 bottles of this made in total. And this is basically a yearly release for the distillery. I believe their most recent one was the 12th edition. I had that one as well. And this is actually, I've had 3 Islay Barley releases so far. And this is the only one I own as of yet. So on the nose, salty, coastal, barbecued, citrus, lemon. Oh my goodness, yeah. It's like that lemon was like dipped in salt and then thrown on the barbecue. And just let to sit there and sizzle. There's like undercurrents of like mandarin orange in that too. So again, really citrus forward. Some tropical fruits in here too, like guava and pineapple notes. Very malt forward, very very clean profile. There's no like sherry funk on this. There's no like overcoat of syrupy goodness from like PX. There's no nuttiness that I can tell off the nose. So it's just really clean profile. I'd say like pear flavored boiled sweets, like hard candies. In particular, I'm thinking of this old jar of hard candies we'd get at Costco, of all things, that were shaped like different fruits and would all stick together in the jar and become really gross. But that's the image that's evoked in my mind right now. It's a beautiful, light, earthy, coastal peat smoke. It's not covering up the signature, the spirit, the character of this whiskey. It's just like adding to it. The smoke is like all around the edges of this nose on the periphery. Yeah, it's not the star of the show. It's adding to it in kind of in a harmonious way. Yeah, marvelous nose. It's like smoked it's like smoked Five Alive fruit juice and barley soup with that malt note. I think that's a ridiculous nosing note. Just disregard that. But that's what I'm thinking. All right, let's take a sip. First thing I noticed, super oily, super viscous. And again, that's something that I experience on most Islay Barley releases. I get that with Bruichladdich. I get that with Kilchoman. Yeah, a lot of viscosity, a lot of body, a lot of heft. Wow, sweet, malty, citrus tones here. Again, that lemon. That's coastal salinity, malt, smoke. It's billowing smoke right now. Oh man, it's like It's almost like a beachside campfire smoke. It really is. But it's just like you're a few feet away from it. It's not like the wind's blowing that smoke in your face. The wind direction hasn't changed and hasn't chased you to the other side of the fire yet, if you know what I'm talking about. Honey, sweet malt, the lightest touch of pepper. There's like a heathery floral note in there too. On the finish, it's going way more medicinal and coastal on the back end. Again, that grilling fruit note right on the barbecue. That's where those citrus fruits are, alongside of some savory meats. Probably like a meat skewer, but with fruit, like almost like a Hawaiian sort of meat skewer. That earthy smoke impact, it starts to fade on the finish. But it's leaving behind some like leathery notes. Oh my goodness. If I wanted to drink a peated whiskey in the summer on a hot day, it's probably gonna be something like this. A clean ex-bourbon profile that's giving me that peat lick, but not hitting me over the head with it. Oh man. Yeah, summer day, oceanside. This is great. One more sip. This is completely a wheelhouse whiskey for me. This is, I'll have to go ahead and say it, this is my favorite Kilchoman yearly release. This is what I look forward to from Kilchoman every single year. I love that this whiskey isn't as heavily peated as their standard fare. The combination of the lower phenol level and the use of majority ex-bourbon casks really allows the distillate to show off its character. And no one thing really takes over in this whiskey, whether it's peat or cask influence or otherwise. It's all very much in balance and it's all very much in play. Nothing gets overshadowed. As I mentioned earlier, I always find the Islay barley variants of Kilchoman and Bruichladdich to be a bit more oily, viscous, robust. So I love the mouthfeel on this whiskey. And additionally, I think the bottling strength of 50% alcohol on this, as opposed to 46 for their like Macure Bay Saneg, I think that's a great idea for this whiskey in particular because it is a little bit more subtle. It's not as loud as their other bottles, which that extra little ABV helps it cope with that a bit more. I think that's the perfect bottling strength for this. As for score, I am absolutely enamored with this whiskey. It is, I'm not hiding it at all here. This whiskey is right up my alley, and I love how much they've steered into making something that is completely from their part of the world. I'm gonna give this 89 out of 100. I would score it higher if I really wanted to show my bias. I'd give it probably a 90. But that's not just taking into account the flavor, the taste, the nose. That would be going further. So I'm not going to do that. It's 89 out of 100 for me. And again, it's for all those reasons I mentioned and more. The flavor value rating basis. It's just a very interesting whiskey. In regards to other batches of this, because I have had 3 batches of it now, I have found that the more recent batches are actually better, in my opinion, than the earlier ones. And maybe that's down to having a bit more maturity, a bit more age to the whiskey. I tried edition number 3. I actually wasn't a big fan of it. However, edition number 12, I think, was almost every bit as good as this 10th edition. And I'm looking at trying to find a bottle of the 11th edition to get an idea of that one too. But the 10th is fantastic. The 12 was great too. So the later editions, I would have no qualms telling you that they are good to go. So who is this whiskey for? I think this whiskey is for any whiskey anorak, any Islay lover, anyone who's really just looking for something that is completely 100% of the place it was made. It's not for that person who's looking for the next most heavily peated whiskey that they can go ahead and knock back. It's not for that. It's not extreme in that sense. And it's not for like the person that's looking for the mega sherry bomb. It has Oloroso Sherry Butts as part of its cask makeup, but it's not an overtly sherried whiskey. So it's not for that person looking for a sherry bomb. It's for the person who wants to get to know Kilchoman's true spirit character. Someone who wants something uniquely Islay, and for someone who wants to experience a whiskey that really is not like any others. So for me, this whiskey is a buy. If you like Islay whiskey, I feel like you have to at least try this whiskey and highly consider buying it. Well, that's the review, guys. That's it for me here, Whiskey on the West Coast. Once again, if you haven't already, like, share, subscribe, all those great YouTube things that you hear from everybody else. Comment down below if you have some thoughts to share. I'd love to comment back and have a conversation with you. Until next time, thank you for joining me here on the West Coast. Slàinte.